The massive alien ships appeared without warning above Earth's major cities. They were unlike anything humans had ever seen. Smooth, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, making them shimmer like mirages in the sky. Each ship was the size of a small moon, casting shadows that plunged entire metropolitan areas into darkness. Maria Santos, the UN Secretary General, stood at the window of her New York office, watching the impossible sight unfold. The ships had been there for 3 days now, silent and motionless. No weapons had been fired, no communications attempted. They simply waited, like predators studying their prey. The silence ended on the 4th day. A beam of blue light descended from the ship hovering over Manhattan, and suddenly the air in the UN General Assembly Hall began to shimmer. The delegates who had been arguing about Earth's response fell silent as 3 figures materialized in the center of the room. The creatures were tall, nearly 9 feet in height, with bodies that appeared to be made of living crystal. Their leader, who would later identify himself as Ambassador Zethkar, stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice echoed strangely as if coming from multiple directions at once. "Humans of Earth," Zethkar began, his crystalline face showing no emotion. "We are representatives of the Galactic Hegemony Council. We have observed your species for the past 50 of your years, ever since you achieved nuclear capability. Now that you have developed faster than light travel, you have become our concern." Maria Santos stood up from her seat among the delegates. "Ambassador Zethkar, on behalf of Earth, we welcome this first contact. We hope we can establish peaceful relations between our species." Zethkar's head tilted slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed amusement. "You misunderstand the nature of this meeting, human. We are not here to establish relations. We are here to inform you of your new status within the Galactic Order." The hall erupted in angry voices, but Zethkar continued without pause. "For 10,000 years, the Council has maintained peace and stability across this galaxy. We have achieved this through order, discipline, and the careful management of lesser species. Your kind represents chaos, unpredictable, violent, and prone to irrational behavior. Left unchecked, you will spread this chaos throughout the stars." "What exactly are you proposing?" Maria asked, though she already feared the answer. "We are not proposing anything," Zethkar replied. "We are issuing directives. First, you will immediately surrender all military assets to Council forces. Second, your population will undergo genetic optimization to remove aggressive and chaotic tendencies. Third, 80% of your species will be relocated to designated colony worlds where they can be properly supervised. Fourth, Earth will remain under permanent Council oversight to ensure compliance." The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly delegates from every nation began to stand. First the Americans, then the Chinese, the Russians, the Europeans, the Africans, the South Americans, the representatives from small island nations that barely appeared on most maps. One by one they rose to their feet in a show of unity that had never been seen in the UN's history. "And if we refuse?" Maria asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Refusal is not an option," Zethkar stated. "However, we understand that primitive species often require time to accept reality. You have 30 of your days to prepare for implementation of these directives. Use this time wisely." The alien ambassador turned to leave, but Maria's voice stopped him. "Ambassador, I need to clarify something. You said refusal is not an option, but I want to make sure you understand our position clearly." Zethkar paused, turning back to face her. "On behalf of every nation, every government, and every human being on this planet," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I hereby formally reject your demands, all of them, completely and absolutely." For the first time, Zethkar's crystalline features showed what might have been surprise. "You do not understand the consequences of defiance. We have the power to destroy your world." "Maybe you do," Maria replied, "but we would rather die free than live as slaves." The other 2 aliens, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, stepped closer to their ambassador. They communicated in a series of harmonic tones that hurt human ears to hear. When they finished, Zethkar looked back at Maria with what appeared to be genuine confusion. "In our surveys of over 300 species, none have chosen extinction over integration. Your response is unprecedented." "Then you haven't been surveying the right species," said the Russian representative, standing up. "Humans don't surrender. We never have." "Even when facing impossible odds?" Zethkar asked. "Especially then," replied the Chinese ambassador. Zethkar was quiet for a long moment, studying the assembled humans. Very well. You have been warned. When your cities burn and your people cry out for mercy, remember that you chose this path. The three aliens began to fade, but Maria had one final message. Ambassador, before you go, I want you to remember something too. You said we represent chaos. You're right. But chaos isn't always a weakness. Sometimes it's exactly what's needed to break a system that's grown too rigid to survive. Zethkar's image lingered for a moment longer than the others, his crystalline eyes fixed on Maria's face. Then they were gone, leaving only the faint scent of ozone and the sound of delegates breathing heavily in the sudden silence. Within hours, the alien ships began to move. They didn't leave Earth's orbit. Instead, they spread out, positioning themselves at strategic points around the planet. More ships arrived each day until the night sky was filled with their cold blue light. But something unexpected happened in those 30 days. Instead of the panic and chaos the aliens expected, humanity began to unite. Old enemies set aside their differences. Resources flowed freely between nations. Scientists shared research without regard for patents or national security. Military forces coordinated as if they had been training together for years. In underground bunkers and research facilities around the world, humans worked with desperate urgency. They studied every scrap of data from the alien ships, reverse-engineered captured technology, and prepared for a war they couldn't possibly win. Dr. Sarah Chen, working in a facility deep beneath the Swiss Alps, made the first breakthrough. She discovered that the alien ship's shields operated on a frequency that human technology could potentially disrupt. It wasn't much, but it was a start. General Marcus Webb coordinated evacuation plans that would move millions of people into underground cities that had been constructed with unprecedented speed. Engineers worked around the clock while ordinary citizens volunteered to dig tunnels and move supplies. Artists painted murals on bunker walls. Musicians played concerts in subway stations, and writers documented humanity's final stand. If they were going to die, they would die as themselves, chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely free. On the 29th day, Ambassador Zethkar appeared once more in the UN hall. He found Maria Santos waiting for him, alone except for her security detail. "We have come to collect your formal surrender," he announced. Maria smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. "I have a message for your council, Ambassador. Tell them that Earth's answer remains the same. We will not kneel. We will not surrender. And we will not go quietly into your perfect ordered galaxy. Then you have chosen extinction." "No," Maria replied. "We've chosen to fight for something you'll never understand. We've chosen to remain human." As Zethkar faded for the final time, Maria looked up at the ceiling, knowing that somewhere above them, alien war machines were preparing to enforce the Council's will. But for the first time in days, she felt something like hope. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. The 30 days passed faster than anyone thought possible. Across the globe, humanity worked with an intensity that bordered on madness. What should have taken years was accomplished in weeks. What should have been impossible became routine. Dr. Sarah Chen barely slept anymore. In her underground laboratory beneath the Swiss mountains, she and her team had managed something that still amazed her. They had cracked the basic operating principles of Council technology. It wasn't enough to build weapons that could match theirs, but it was enough to build weapons that might surprise them. "The key is their predictability," she explained to the assembled team of scientists from 20 different nations. "Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it follows rigid patterns. They've optimized everything for maximum efficiency, which means they've eliminated variables." "Variables?" asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese physicist who'd been working on shield disruption systems. "Chaos," Sarah replied with a tired smile. "They've built machines that work perfectly under expected conditions, but we don't have to give them expected conditions." 3 floors above Sarah's lab, General Marcus Webb studied holographic displays showing troop movements across 6 continents. The evacuation was proceeding ahead of schedule. Ordinary people had volunteered to work 20-hour shifts, moving their neighbors and families into the underground cities that had sprung up like mushrooms after rain. "Sir," his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Hayes, approached with a tablet. "Latest reports from the civilian sectors. Moscow's underground complex is at 90% capacity. The London tunnels are complete. New York's subway system has been converted into a full residential complex. Marcus nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the orbital displays showing council ships. Any change in their positions? No, sir. Still maintaining standard formation. They seem to be waiting for something. They're waiting for us to panic, Marcus said. In their experience, species either surrender immediately or tear themselves apart with fear. They don't understand that fear can make humans work together instead of fall apart. In the converted subway station that now served as New York's underground city center, Maria Santos walked among the families who had made their homes in what used to be train platforms. Children played games between the support pillars while their parents worked on everything from food distribution to weapons assembly. Ms. Santos called out Elena Vasquez, a former cargo ship captain who now coordinated supply runs to the surface. I wanted to thank you for what you said to the aliens. My daughter asked me yesterday why we're fighting instead of just doing what they want. I told her what you told them. Some things are worth dying for. Maria squeezed Elena's shoulder. How are the supply runs going? Better than expected. We've been able to salvage more alien technology from their scout ships than we hoped. Chen's people think they can use it to upgrade our own systems. Above ground, the world had become a different place. The alien ships cast permanent shadows over major cities, but instead of cowering, humans had adapted. They worked at night, moved through tunnels, and communicated through coded signals. Every day, small teams made raids on isolated alien patrols, not to win battles, but to learn and gather intelligence. Captain James Morrison led one such team through the ruins of what used to be central London. The council had begun sending down scout units to map human positions, and Morrison's job was to make sure as few of those scouts as possible made it back to their ships. Remember, he whispered to his squad as they took positions around an alien patrol, we're not trying to kill them all. We just need to capture their equipment and send a message. The attack was swift and brutal. Humans had learned that council soldiers, despite their advanced armor and weapons, relied heavily on their technology. When that technology was disrupted by the crude but effective jammers Sarah's team had developed, they became confused and vulnerable. Morrison's team disabled 3 alien soldiers and captured their weapons before disappearing back into the tunnels. It was a tiny victory against an overwhelming force, but it proved something important. The council's soldiers could be beaten. Similar raids were happening around the world. In Tokyo, a team led by former Yakuza members had developed techniques for disabling alien armor joints. In Cairo, archaeologists who knew every tunnel beneath the city were leading council patrols into ancient traps that had been updated with modern explosives. But the most important work was happening in the minds and hearts of ordinary people. Father Miguel Santos had been conducting services in the Mexico City underground for 2 weeks now. His congregation included Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, and people who had never thought about religion until they faced the possibility of extinction. We are not fighting for our gods, he told them during his evening service. We are fighting for our right to choose our gods. We are fighting for our right to believe differently, to think differently, to be different. In the Shanghai tunnels, Dr. Liu Wei was conducting philosophy classes for anyone who wanted to attend. The council speaks of order and efficiency, she said to a group that included engineers, artists, soldiers, and children. But what makes us human is not our order, it's our questions. They want to eliminate our doubts, our curiosity, our wild ideas. They want to make us stop asking what if. The underground cities had become more than shelters. They had become laboratories for human cooperation. Old divisions between rich and poor, educated and uneducated, young and old, seemed meaningless when everyone shared the same fate. A former billionaire worked alongside a street sweeper to maintain water systems. Nobel Prize winners learned combat techniques from gang members. Children taught elderly people how to use new communication devices. In the deepest levels of the underground complexes, artists worked frantically to preserve human culture. Musicians recorded songs, writers documented stories, painters created murals that covered tunnel walls with images of human history and dreams of human futures. If we lose, said composer Maria Gonzalez as she finished a symphony that mixed traditional orchestral instruments with the sounds of machinery and alien transmissions, at least someone might find these records someday and know who we were. But not everyone believed they would lose. Dr. Sarah Chen had made another breakthrough. By studying captured Council weapons, she had discovered something remarkable. The aliens' technology was based on principles that made perfect sense, but only if you assumed the universe worked in predictable ways. They've never encountered true randomness, she explained to General Webb during one of their daily briefings. Everything in their technology assumes that given the same inputs, you'll get the same outputs. But human behavior isn't like that. We're chaotic in ways their systems can't account for. How does that help us? Webb asked. It means we can build weapons that work differently every time we use them. Missiles that change their flight patterns randomly. Viruses that rewrite themselves. Tactics that make no logical sense but somehow work anyway. Webb smiled grimly. You want us to weaponize human insanity. Exactly. As the 30th day dawned, humanity was ready. Not to surrender, not to win, but to fight in a way that no species in galactic history had ever fought before. They had turned their greatest weakness, their unpredictability, into their greatest strength. In underground command centers around the world, military leaders made final preparations for a war that would be unlike anything the Council had ever experienced. They would not fight by the rules of galactic warfare. They would not follow predictable strategies. They would fight like humans, chaotic, desperate, and absolutely determined to remain free. Above them, the alien ships began to move into attack formation. The Council had decided that humanity's 30 days of grace were over. It was time to teach this chaotic species the price of defiance. But as the first Council attack ships descended toward Earth's atmosphere, they were met with something their perfect algorithms had never predicted. Humans who refused to behave logically, who fought not because they could win, but because surrendering was unthinkable. The war for Earth's freedom was about to begin. The attack began at exactly noon, Greenwich Mean Time. The Council ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their weapon systems charging with a sound like thunder that never ended. From orbit, massive beam weapons reached down to carve trenches through cities, while smaller ships deployed troops in perfect geometric patterns. General Marcus Webb watched the invasion begin from his command center buried 2 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. Screens showed the destruction happening across the globe. London burning, Tokyo under bombardment, Sydney's harbor boiling as energy weapons superheated the water. Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes reported, Council forces are following exactly the attack pattern we predicted. They're hitting major population centers first, then military installations, then industrial complexes. Of course they are, Webb replied. They're logical. They think we'll surrender once they prove how helpless we are. He turned to his communications officer. Send the signal. Operation Chaos is now active. Around the world, human forces began to implement plans that violated every principle of military strategy. Instead of trying to defend strategic positions, they abandoned them. Instead of concentrating their forces, they scattered them. Instead of following predictable tactics, they did things that made no sense at all. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of what used to be a cargo hauler, but was now humanity's strangest weapon. The ship had been retrofitted with one of Dr. Chen's most insane inventions, a faster-than-light drive that didn't care about safety. Protocols. Council dreadnought in range. Her weapons officer reported, They're demanding our surrender. Tell them we'd like to discuss terms, Elena replied with a cold smile. The massive Council ship, over 2 miles long and armed with enough firepower to level continents, slowed its approach. Its captain was probably congratulating himself on the quick surrender of yet another primitive vessel. Elena waited until the dreadnought was close enough to touch, then gave the order that no sane military commander would ever give. Overload the FTL drive, all power to the engines, and ram them. Her crew, all volunteers who had known this was a one-way mission, strapped themselves in as their tiny ship accelerated to impossible speeds. The Council dreadnought's shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and projectiles, but they had never been tested against a ship moving at faster than light speeds while still in normal space. The cargo hauler struck the dreadnought's shield generators and tore through them like paper through a candle flame. The explosion that followed lit up half the sky and sent debris raining down across 3 states. When the light faded, the massive Council ship was gone, along with Elena's crew and 3,000 alien soldiers. But Elena's sacrifice was just one of hundreds happening around the globe. In the tunnels beneath Paris, Former gang members led by a philosophy professor named Jacques Moreau were conducting urban warfare that followed no rules the council understood. They would attack a patrol, disappear into sewers, then appear miles away to attack a completely different target. When council forces surrounded a building they thought contained human fighters, they would find it empty except for recordings of human music playing at volumes that interfered with alien communication systems. The key, Jacques explained to his fighters as they prepared for another raid, is to make them think like us instead of thinking like them. Every time they have to make a decision we wouldn't make, we win a little victory. Above ground, Dr. Sarah Chen's weapons were proving their worth in ways that terrified even their creators. Human missiles that changed course randomly were striking targets that should have been impossible to hit. Computer viruses that rewrote themselves faster than alien systems could adapt were bringing down entire command networks, but the most effective human weapon wasn't technological at all, it was psychological, Captain. James Morrison's team had developed a new form of warfare that council soldiers couldn't comprehend. Instead of trying to kill every alien they encountered, they captured them and then did something unprecedented. They talked to them. "Why do you fight for the council?" Morrison asked a captured alien soldier in what used to be a London subway station. The creature, which looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird, stared at him with golden eyes. "I fight because the council commands it. That is the natural order." "But what did you do before you fought for the council?" Morrison pressed. "What did your species do before they joined the Galactic Order?" For a moment the alien was silent. Then, almost whisper quiet, it said, We sang. My people were singers. We made music from the harmonics of our home planet's crystal formations." Morrison leaned forward. "When was the last time you sang?" The alien's eyes widened, and for the first time since its capture, it looked afraid. I do not remember. The optimization process removes unnecessary cultural behaviors," Morrison played a recording on his tablet, human music mixed with the harmonic frequencies that Dr. Chen's team had extracted from alien technology. The captured soldier began to shake, then to weep, then to sing in a voice that was beautiful and heartbreaking. Similar conversations were happening in underground facilities around the world. Human interrogators weren't trying to extract military intelligence. They were trying to extract memories, identity, and the spark of individuality that the council had tried to erase. Some alien soldiers broke down completely when reminded of who they used to be. Others became so enraged at what had been done to them that they turned on their former masters. A few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process the return of thoughts and feelings they hadn't experienced in centuries. Word of these de-optimizations spread through the council ranks like a virus. For the first time in millennia, council soldiers began to question orders, to hesitate in battle, to remember what they had lost. Ambassador Zethkar watched the battle reports with growing alarm from his flagship in Earth's orbit. Nothing was proceeding according to plan. His forces should have crushed human resistance within hours, but instead they were being worn down by tactics that made no logical sense. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his tactical officer. 17 major vessels and 43 support craft, came the reply. "But that's not our primary concern. We're experiencing widespread insubordination among the ground forces. Soldiers are refusing orders, abandoning positions, and in some cases actively assisting human forces." Zethkar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion or anger. "That is impossible. Our soldiers undergo optimization. They cannot disobey. Nevertheless, it is happening. The humans appear to be using some form of psychological warfare that reverses the optimization process." For the first time in his 1,000-year career, Zethkar felt something approaching uncertainty. The humans were not simply resisting, they were converting his own forces against him. They were fighting with weapons he didn't understand, using tactics that violated every principle of warfare, and somehow managing to inflict serious damage despite their technological inferiority. "Deploy the pacification arrays," he ordered. "Begin full planetary optimization. We will end this rebellion by removing the humans' capacity for resistance." But even as he gave the order, Zethkar found himself thinking about something one of the captured humans had said during interrogation. "You can't optimize away the human spirit. You can only drive it underground until it's ready to explode." On Earth's surface, the battles raged with increasing intensity. Council forces had superior weapons and numbers, But human forces had something the aliens couldn't quantify: the ability to turn desperation into strength, to find hope in hopeless situations, and to fight not just for victory but for the simple right to remain themselves. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal trackers were leading alien patrols into desert traps that had been used to hunt dangerous animals for thousands of years, updated with modern explosives and Dr. Chen's electronic warfare devices. In the Amazon rainforest, indigenous communities worked with environmental scientists to turn the jungle itself into a weapon, using their knowledge of the terrain to make council soldiers disappear into green labyrinths from which they never emerged. In the Himalayas, Tibetan monks collaborated with mountain climbers to establish high-altitude bases where human fighters could strike at low-flying alien craft, and then vanish into terrain that council technology couldn't navigate everywhere. The pattern was the same: humans refusing to fight by alien rules, using their chaotic creativity to turn weaknesses into strengths and find ways to hurt an enemy that should have been invincible. As the first day of war ended, neither side had achieved their objectives. The Council had failed to pacify Earth quickly and cleanly. Humanity had failed to drive off the invaders. But something fundamental had changed. For the first time in galactic history, a primitive species had fought the mighty Council to a standstill. More importantly, they had begun to awaken something in the Council's own forces: the memory of who they used to be before optimization, before surrender, before they accepted that resistance was futile. The war for Earth was far from over, but already its effects were rippling outward through the galaxy, carrying a message that would terrify the Council's leadership. It was possible to fight back. It was possible to resist, and it was possible to remain free. The humans had lit a fire. The discovery came by accident, as many of humanity's greatest breakthroughs did. Dr. Sarah, Chen was examining data cores captured from a downed Council command ship when she found files that shouldn't have existed, historical records that the Council had supposedly destroyed long ago. "General Webb," she called from her laboratory deep beneath the Swiss Alps, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "You need to see this immediately." Webb arrived to find Chen staring at holographic displays showing images that made his stomach turn. Alien species that looked familiar but wrong somehow. Too orderly, too uniform, missing something essential that he couldn't quite identify. "These are the Council member species," Chen explained, her hands shaking as she manipulated the display. "But these images are from before they joined the Council." The first image showed fox-like creatures with bright, intelligent eyes and colorful fur patterns. They were building complex structures that seemed to grow organically from the landscape, each one unique and beautiful. "The Canary," Chen continued. "According to these records, they were master strategists and artists. They could plan battles that were like symphonies and create art that could make other species weep with joy." She switched to the next image. The fox creatures looked the same physically, but their eyes were empty. Their fur had faded to uniform gray, and their buildings were identical geometric shapes arranged in perfect grids. "This is them after optimization." The Council removed their creativity, their individuality, their ability to think outside established patterns. They turned master strategists into mindless drones who can only follow predetermined battle plans. Webb studied the images with growing horror. "What about the others?" Chen cycled through more files. The Thessians had been an aquatic species of philosophers and poets who built cities that flowed like music through their ocean worlds. After optimization, they became silent workers in underwater factories, their songs reduced to simple work rhythms. The Drakmori had been explorers and inventors who delighted in discovering new worlds and creating impossible technologies. Post-optimization, they served as maintenance workers on Council ships, their curiosity replaced by mechanical efficiency. Species after species, the pattern was the same. Vibrant, chaotic, creative civilizations reduced to uniform servants in the Council's perfect order. "How many?" Webb asked quietly. 47 species, Chen replied, all conquered and integrated over the past 10,000 years. All of them had their essential nature stripped away and replaced with artificial loyalty to the Council. But the worst revelation was still to come. Chen pulled up another file, this one marked with symbols that her translation software identified as Security Classification Absolute. "This is the Council's real plan," she said. They don't just want to rule the galaxy, they want to remake it. Every form of life, every way of thinking, every possibility for growth and change, all reduced to a single perfect pattern. They call it the Final Order. The file detailed plans that stretched across millennia. Once all known species were optimized, the Council would begin modifying entire star systems, reshaping worlds to match their vision of perfect efficiency. Eventually, they planned to extend their reach beyond their home galaxy, spreading their order to every corner of the universe. They're not building an empire, Webb realized. They're building a prison, a galaxy-sized cage where nothing can ever change, where nothing unexpected can ever happen again. Chen nodded grimly. And we're the last unoptimized species they've encountered. If they succeed here, there will be no one left to resist them. Word of the discovery spread through the human underground like wildfire. In command centers, bunkers, and hidden bases around the world, the revelation transformed the war from a fight for survival into something far more important, a fight for the soul of the galaxy itself. Maria Santos addressed the world from her bunker beneath New York, her words carried by hidden transmitters to every human settlement on Earth and beyond. We are not just fighting for humanity, she declared. We are fighting for every species the Council has destroyed, every civilization they have erased, every voice they have silenced. We carry the hopes of 47 extinct cultures, and we will not let their sacrifice be in vain. But the most significant impact of the discovery was on the Council's own forces. Human fighters began broadcasting the historical records during every engagement, showing alien soldiers images of what their species used to be. The effect was devastating. On the battlefields around ruined London, Canary soldiers saw images of their ancestors' beautiful, chaotic cities, and began to remember fragments of suppressed memories. Some fell to their knees weeping for losses they couldn't fully understand. Others turned their weapons on their own command officers. In the flooded ruins of Venice, Thessian troops heard recordings of their people's ancient songs and began to sing again for the first time in centuries. Their voices, rusty from disuse, gradually found harmony as genetic memories awakened. Captain James Morrison led a team of human fighters in a desperate assault on a Council command post outside Munich. They found it defended by Drakmori soldiers, the former explorers and inventors who now served as mindless technicians. "Look at this," Morrison called to the aliens, holding up a holographic projector, showing images of ancient Drakmori space explorers discovering new worlds with expressions of wonder and joy. "This is who you used to be." One of the Drakmori soldiers stopped firing and stared at the images. Its metallic skin began to shift colors, something that optimized Drakmori were not supposed to be able to do. "I remember," it said in accented English. "We used to build ships that could travel between dimensions. We explored realities that existed only in mathematics. We were magnificent." The soldier turned its weapon on its own command structure and began systematically destroying the Council's communication equipment while actual tears streamed down its metallic face. Similar scenes were playing out across Earth and beyond. For the first time in 10,000 years, optimized species were remembering who they used to be. The very foundation of the Council's power, the unquestioning loyalty of their servants, was crumbling. Ambassador Zethkar received increasingly desperate reports from his field commanders. Entire units were defecting. Soldiers were refusing orders. Some were actively joining human forces, sharing intelligence and technology. "This is impossible," he declared during an emergency meeting of the Council High Command. "Optimization cannot be reversed. It is genetically locked, psychologically reinforced, and socially conditioned." "Yet it is happening," replied Councillor Vrayx, a being that looked like a living shadow. "The humans have found a way to awaken memories that were supposed to be permanently erased." Zethkar studied tactical displays showing the deteriorating situation on Earth. "How are they doing it?" "We believe it is related to their chaotic nature," Vrayx explained. "Unlike any species we have encountered, humans do not follow predictable patterns. Their unpredictability appears to create resonance effects in optimized minds, breaking down the conditioning. Then we accelerate the final phase," Zethkar decided. "Deploy the absolute optimization array. We will process the entire planet simultaneously, removing not just resistance but the capacity for resistance." But even as he gave the order, Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. The humans had shown that optimization could be reversed. If that was true, what did it mean for species like his own Vorthak, who had been among the first to join the Council willingly thousands of years ago? Had they been optimized too? Had they given up something essential when they embraced the Council's perfect order? For the first time in millennia, Zethkar found himself wondering what his people had been like before they met the Council. Had they been different? Had they been chaotic? On Earth, human forces prepared for what they knew would be the final battle. The Council was bringing their ultimate weapon into position, a massive space station that could blanket entire planets with optimization fields, turning every living thing into a perfectly obedient servant of the galactic order. But humanity was not the same species that had first faced the Council's ultimatum. They had learned to fight in ways that no previous resistance had ever tried. More importantly, they had allies now, former enemies who remembered what freedom meant and were willing to die to reclaim it. Dr. Sarah Chen worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to find a way to amplify the de-optimization effect. If they could broadcast it strongly enough, they might be able to break the conditioning of entire Council fleets at once. General Webb coordinated with defecting alien forces, learning their technology and sharing human tactics. Together, they planned an assault that was so crazy, so unpredictable, so utterly chaotic that it just might work. And in bunkers around the world, ordinary humans prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, not just for their own freedom, but for the freedom of species they had never met, on worlds they would never see. The final battle for the galaxy's soul was about to begin. On one side stood the Council's perfect order, 10,000 years in the making. On the other stood chaos, creativity, and the simple, stubborn refusal. The absolute optimization array hung in Earth's orbit like a mechanical moon, its surface covered with thousands of transmitter dishes that could blanket entire continents with mind-altering energy. Ambassador Zethkar stood on its command deck, watching the final preparations for humanity's extinction. "All systems are operational," reported the array's commander, a optimized Vorthak whose crystalline features showed no emotion. "We can begin planetary processing at your command." Zethkar stared down at the blue and white world below. In 72 hours of fighting, these chaotic humans had accomplished something unprecedented. They had made him question the natural order of the universe. Worse, their influence was spreading beyond Earth. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy of optimized species beginning to remember, to resist, to rebel. "Begin the process," he ordered, though something deep in his mind whispered that this was wrong. But Zethkar's moment of doubt was exactly what General Marcus Webb had been waiting for. Now, Webb commanded from his bunker deep beneath the Colorado Mountains. Around the globe, human forces launched the most insane assault in military history. It wasn't designed to destroy the array. They lacked the firepower for that. Instead, it was designed to be so chaotic, so unpredictable, that it would overload every tactical computer the Council possessed. From the ruins of major cities, thousands of improvised missiles launched simultaneously. Each one followed a different flight path, changed course randomly, and carried a different payload. Some were loaded with explosives, others with Dr. Chen's electronic warfare viruses, and still others with nothing but holographic projectors, broadcasting images of unoptimized alien cultures. In Earth's oceans, modified submarines surfaced and fired torpedoes that flew through the air like missiles, their guidance systems programmed with flight patterns inspired by the migration routes of extinct Earth animals. Captain Elena Vasquez led a fleet of converted cargo ships on one final suicide run. But this time the ships didn't ram their targets. They exploded in seemingly random patterns that created interference clouds, jamming Council sensors and communications. The assault was militarily pointless. Most of the missiles missed their targets. The submarines were destroyed almost immediately, and Elena's ships barely scratched the array's shields. But that wasn't the point. The point was to create so much chaos that every Council AI would overload, trying to predict what humans would do. "Next, their attack patterns make no sense," reported the array's tactical officer, his voice showing the first hints of emotion in decades. "We cannot establish firing solutions because we cannot predict their movements." "Then fire at random," Zethkar ordered. "Sir, random firing violates tactical protocols." "Do it!" But even as the array's weapons began firing wildly at Earth's surface, Dr. Sarah Chen was implementing the real plan. Using equipment salvaged from dozens of crashed council ships, she had built something that no sane engineer would have attempted, a de-optimization transmitter powerful enough to reach across star systems. "It's not going to work," her assistant, Dr. Tanaka, said nervously. "The power requirements alone should cause a cascade failure." "It doesn't have to work perfectly," Chen replied, her hands dancing across controls that sparked and smoked. "It just has to work once." She activated the transmitter, and every piece of electronic equipment in the mountain bunker died. But the signal went out, a chaotic burst of human consciousness, creativity, and refusal to surrender, amplified by alien technology and broadcast across the galaxy. The effect was immediate and devastating. On the array, optimized soldiers suddenly stopped following orders as memories of their unoptimized ancestors flooded back. The Thessian communications officer began singing an ancient song of her people, while tears streamed down her aquatic features. Drakmori engineers abandoned their post to stare at their hands, remembering when they had used them to build wonders instead of weapons. "What is happening?" Zethkar demanded, but his question was answered when the wave of de-optimization reached him. For the first time in 3,000 years, Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak remembered what his people had been before they joined the council. They had been poets and philosophers, creators of crystal gardens that sang with the music of starlight. They had built cities that existed partially in other dimensions, places where thought and reality danced together in impossible beauty, and he had given it all up for the cold perfection of the council's order. The scream that escaped from Zethkar's throat was not the controlled emission of an optimized being. It was the raw anguish of a poet discovering that he had murdered poetry itself. But the de-optimization wave didn't stop at Earth's orbit. It rippled outward at faster than light speeds, carried by the quantum entanglement networks that connected council systems across the galaxy. On a dozen worlds, optimized Canary workers suddenly remembered how to paint with light and began creating murals on factory walls. In the deep space mining stations, Drakmori drones recalled their species' love of exploration and began modifying their equipment to explore new realities instead of extracting resources. The Council's perfect order was collapsing as 47 enslaved species simultaneously remembered what freedom meant. Admiral Korvex, Supreme Commander of the Council fleets, watched his tactical displays show rebellion breaking out across hundreds of worlds. His own bridge crew was affected. Optimized officers were abandoning their posts, some weeping, others laughing, all of them rediscovering emotions that had been locked away for millennia. "All fleets," he broadcast across the Council's communication network, "implement Protocol Omega, destroy all rebellious systems, maintain order at any cost." But his order was too late. The de-optimization wave had reached the core worlds, the ancient heart of the Council's empire. On these planets, species that had been optimized for so long that no one remembered their original nature suddenly awakened to themselves. The Zephyrians, who had been reduced to living computers, remembered that they had once been dreamers who built impossible architectures in the clouds of gas giants. The Nethek, who served as the Council's silent assassins, recalled that they had originally been a species of healers and philosophers. Most shocking of all, even the original Council species, the first members who had created the Galactic Order, began to remember what they had sacrificed in the name of perfection. On Earth, Maria Santos stood in the ruins of the UN building, watching the Council array tear itself apart as its crew mutinied. Around the world, the remaining human resistance emerged from their bunkers to find alien soldiers laying down their weapons and asking for forgiveness. "General Webb," she spoke into her communicator, "what's our status?" "The Council fleet is in complete disarray," Webb replied, his voice filled with amazement. "Alien ships are either fleeing the system or joining our forces. The array has powered down its optimization weapons and is broadcasting surrender signals." But Maria knew the real victory wasn't military, it was philosophical. Humanity had proven that consciousness couldn't be contained, that free will couldn't be eliminated, and that the universe was big enough for infinite ways of thinking and being. 6 months later, Maria Santos stood before the first galactic assembly of free species, held in a space station jointly constructed by humans and their former enemies. The gathered delegates represented over 200 species, the 47 that had been de-optimized, plus dozens more that had been hiding from the Council in the galaxy's outer reaches, and others that were just now beginning to explore space. "We gather not to create a new empire," Maria addressed the assembly, "but to ensure that no empire like the Council can ever rise again. We commit ourselves to the principle that diversity is strength, that chaos is creative, and that no species has the right to impose its vision of perfection on another." The Canary delegate, her fur now showing the brilliant colors that had been suppressed for thousands of years, stood to speak. "The humans have given us back our souls. We will not forget this gift, and we will help ensure that it spreads to every corner of the universe." Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's Minister of Xenological Sciences, was working with former Council species to develop new technologies based on cooperative chaos instead of imposed order. The results were already promising: ships that could navigate by intuition, computers that could dream, and communication systems that worked better when they didn't follow logical protocols. General Webb had been appointed as the first commander of the Free Species Defense Force, a military organization designed not to conquer but to protect other species' right to remain different. His forces included humans, but also Drakmori explorers who had redesigned their ships for rescue missions instead of conquest, and Thessian philosophers who had turned their understanding of harmony into new forms of peaceful conflict resolution. But perhaps the most surprising transformation was that of Zethkar himself. The former Council ambassador had become an advocate for species rights, using his knowledge of Council methods to help other civilizations detect and resist optimization attempts. He had also begun working to restore his own people's lost culture, teaching young Vorthak how to grow crystal gardens and compose poetry with light. "I spent 3,000 years believing that order was the highest good,"